it says that it's not permissible for any religious group to congregate and pray. So that doesn't discriminate in any way against any particular religion. It speaks generally about all religion. And the reasoning it gives, it says, is that because the public harm is more than the public benefit. So what we have to do, after discussing it with the people, this is what we've come to.
Oh, the picture.
First and foremost, one important distinction is that it talks about congregational prayer and not individual prayer. So if you look at the regulations in the royal parks, it says that you're not allowed to congregate for religious purposes, i.e. worship. So that's congregational prayer and not individual prayer. So if anyone is in the royal parks, according to my knowledge, until I'm corrected, and who wants to pray individually, whether they be male or female, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, and they want to pray individually, there should be no restriction to do that. So if anyone wants to pray individually in Speaker's Corner, aside Speaker's Corner, on the grass, anywhere, that's individually, that can be done according to the regulations. However, praying in congregation, here is a problem because the regulations are put in place for a reason. And as Muslims, we have to be respectful of that, especially considering that we have available resources elsewhere, especially around the area. So what we want to do is we want to publicly declare that we want to be in line with the police policy, or sorry, the Royal Park policy of no congregation in Speaker's Corner, and that from our level we're not going to try and go against the regulation, because this is not from the Islamic spirit. In fact, one of the ahadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which is mentioned in Tirmidhi, is when he talks about 6 or 7 things which places you're not allowed to pray in. One of the places is a tariq, so the place of where people walk. And of the people to do sharh of this hadith or explanation of this hadith, they say the reason why we don't do it in this place is because it causes hassle for other people. So as Muslims, we don't want to cause hassle for Muslims or other non-Muslims. Yeah, because as you guys know, you should know that our religion is not a religion which is attempting to make things harder for people, generally speaking. However, and this is where we say however, right? If you look at the royal policies or the regulations, it also says that this has to be enforced of all religions and not one specific religion. And that if it's not going to be allowed for one religion, it must not be allowed for all religions. Now we have noticed that there are some African people that are of Christian background that come round and congregate, and that they play with the tambourines in a religious worship, and sometimes they have not been recommended by the police to stop or desist what they're doing. So what we want to say is that to try and avoid this kind of discrimination, which we would consider exclusivizing the Muslims in the treatment of reprimand, we have also put a policy in place to protect our own interests as the Muslim community. Now this is called the 3-strike policy. Wait a minute, what's going on now? Yes, it's called the 3-strike policy.
As you know, for the 3 options.
Yeah, so 3 is an odd number. The 3-strike policy works in the following way. We have a panel of Muslims, of 5 Muslims, known to the people of the park. Most of them will be known to the people of the park, and their names will be released maybe shortly, yeah? 5 is an odd number, so a decision always has to be made. It will be like a consultative process, and a decision always has to be made. If any evidence is produced to us as the Muslim community that the police is failing to reprimand other religious people from other faiths when they are worshipping in congregation, and that happens more than 3 times, and there is good enough evidence, the panel of 5 Muslims will decide whether that is something which necessitates a strike. If it happens 3 times, then we will go back to protesting in the form of praying in the corner. Why? Because we would say that in this case the police is discriminating against the Muslims, and they're not doing something which is in the interest of the wider community, and in fact they're exclusivizing the Muslims in discriminatory actions. However, we hope that this doesn't happen. We hope that the police doesn't go down that route, because obviously there is an institutional racism attached to, or a stigma of institutional racism already attached to the police after Stephen Lawrence and these things, especially with the black community, and this will only exacerbate the already existing hate within minorities for the police. So this won't happen. I'm sure the police won't go down that route. So just to show that we are an independent, autonomous community of people, we will not tolerate also, just as we will not tolerate Muslims, we will advise Muslims not to pray in congregation, because that is against the regulation of the park. We will also not tolerate a discrimination of Muslims in the park. And I don't think anyone from a democratic perspective, an Islamic perspective, a Christian perspective, a Jewish perspective, or any other perspective, would be able to disagree with what we are saying here and now today. And this is what we have decided. I think that generally speaking, as Muslims, we need to work on building bridges with other communities, but other communities also need to work on understanding and building bridges with Muslims. This is the decision that's been authorized by many of the, let's say, senior people of from the Muslim community of Speaker's Corner. And do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the one thing I just wanted to point out is, like, Masha, you covered all of it, is that we have in the park hate breaches, yeah, very clear-cut hate breaches. And when you need to understand something, brothers and sisters, is that when this is being enforced, it's not being enforced because a policy regulation in the park has been violated. Wallahi, it's not that. Be very clear that this was not done because there was a policy that was being violated. It wasn't. The reason it's being done, and let me tell you guys, I want to go to Surah Buruj verse 7, even though it kind of correlates with it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and we were watching what they were doing with the believers. They punished them for nothing but that they believed in Allah, the Almighty, the worthy of all praise. So Allah's talking about here with the polytheists and what they were doing to the believing men and the believing women. Now, I'm not saying to you this is what's going today and they're persecuting us. No, I just want to notify you guys that this is a step towards that. Because you know why? It's because of the hatred that they have towards us Muslims. Why? Because we prayed here. Yeah, we prayed it. We didn't harm anybody. We would make sure the brothers, we make sure that we're not blocking paths. So the only reason, and this is the lady who started. This was a lady who I spoke to first when Tommy Robinson came. She took a bacon out of her hand, like I'm a vampire. You know when you go to a vampire and put garlic, yeah, and it goes, oh, yeah. She took a bacon out like bacon means something to us. Oh, I'll cook your bacon and eat it. No one's got a problem with that. So the problem here is this: when you look at the Muslims in history, they live side by side with the Christians and the Jews. They had their churches, their prayer, whatever they want to do, no problem. And we are supposed to be the ones that are accused of stopping. You're not here to enforce religion on other people and shove it down their throat. Look at the hypocrisy that's happening today. Be it Bob, be it Hartoon, I'm going to name people, yeah? Be it that lady, the only reason they stopped us from praying, wallahi, is because of that. Because you know the police had no problem. The police, even though it was in the policy, they had no problem. Because you can see in the video when that lady speaking, the officer was speaking to his higher up, and I said there's no problem, let them pray. But when they brought the policy into place, they did not do it because of violation of the policy. I'll repeat it again. The only reason is that, wallahi, brothers and sisters, they hate us. And I will mention Nazi Germany again. You know why? Because believe me, Hitler did not come and say, kill the Jews. Because nobody would have done it. You know what happened? It was a gradual dehumanization of the Jews. It was starting point. They had banners and they had posters of Jews with big noses and evil-looking creatures, and that's exactly what's happening to us today. And eventually, if we don't stand up to it and talk and we obey by the law of the land, the police officer spoke to Steve, the tour guy. Amazing guy. He came, he reasoned with us, we talked with him. We know they're doing their job. We don't blame them. But just know we have to stand up and talk to this, and that's about it from me.
Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate.
I agree, and I'm English.
Thank you very much.
And you're a Christian.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
what we're saying, just to reiterate the point here, the point is what we've put in place is a three-strike policy. If we see a group of Christians or Jews or Sikhs or whatever congregating in a religious worship type congregation, what has to happen is that evidence will be presented to the panel of 5 people. They will judge whether that is a transgression of the police or whether the police have an acceptable excuse. If that happens 3 times, we will no longer comply by the regulation because no one is, because we are being exclusivized in treatment, and that is of course a step towards the Nuremberg laws that you were referring to. One last thing, guys, and this is the last thing we're going to say, is that look at it's interesting you're saying this because just recently, 2-3 weeks ago, there was this whole palaver about freedom of speech. And no one here is talking about freedom of religious expression. It's really, really interesting because why not talk about freedom of religious expression? Now we've started a petition, which you guys inshallah will put it in the description boxes of these particular channels we have control over, that to change the regulation, because that's the best way of doing it and to secure it for future generations, to change the regulation to allow for a congregation. Now I would recommend to the policymakers, by the way, that there is an upper limit, because you can imagine here being Eid prayers, like you can't imagine 3,000-4,000 people, that could be problematic. Make an upper limit of a congregational prayer of, for example, 10, 15, 20, whatever you want, but don't disallow people in a place where it's meant to be freedom of speech and expression to express themselves in whichever way possible, which doesn't harm anyone else, which is in accordance with the harm principle and liberalism in general.
I just want to finish off with those who kind of stopped us from doing this. Don't think that you've done nothing. You know what you've done, because we can have congregations further down, and every step we take towards our salah is reward for us. So to be honest, don't think you've done something. The only reason we're mentioning this is because we know your hatred is going to grow, and we just want to put a stop to it.
Yeah, Ali.
God bless you guys.
Any questions?
Yeah,
go ahead.
If I do pray,
Yeah.
what law am I breaking?
If you pray individually, you're not even breaking the regulation.
No, I'm saying,
in
if
congregation.
me, you and Ali stand up right now and
Yeah.
pray, what they're gonna arrest me for?
They're not going to arrest you.
What can they lock me up for?
They're not going to lock you
Nothing.
up. Yeah, so the consequences, as far as I know, there are no particular consequences.
Just we don't
So in
we
reality,
just wanna- we
I
don't
know what
wanna
you're saying. So
continue.
in reality, they can't stop us from praying. But we're not gonna pray in congregation just to abide by the policies, to
Yeah.
keep the peace.
Exactly.
Tell us. But I just wanted to know that if I pray in the congregation and I decide to pray, my brothers just go and pray.
The main point-
They can't lock me up. They
You're
can't
right.
arrest me.
But brother, the main thing is here that the Muslims unify upon one particular policy, and the Islamic unity is greater than the congregation in
I
one
hear that.
particular area.
I just want the brothers to know that if you do pray, you're not gonna get arrested.
Yeah.
That's all. But we're not gonna pray in congregation.
No, of course,
Yeah.
I'll respect.
Yeah,
to the
Yeah.
cause.
So this
But
is
you
like
know,
we're making a public war.
Mohammed, I just want to ask our Christian friend, like, what was the points that he agreed with us on, and like, what
Well,
was it?
just what you were saying about Nazi Germany,
Yeah.
and then there seems to be this kind of agenda that's going on in the media, which is gradually demonising Muslims. I'd pick up on that. I can see that.
Would you agree that
agree
there
with
is hate preachers who push that narrative? Yeah.
I don't want to go there, but the two things I would say is I agree with what you said about it happening by stealth.
Yeah.
They're gradually demonising Muslims and associating all Muslims with terrorism, and I think that's totally wrong. As a white English Christian person who was born and brought up here.
Our prayers, were they disturbing you at all?
No, and also this is supposed to be a haven of freedom of speech and liberty of conscience and freedom of religion. Now, when I came here, I prayed. I just stopped by the fence there and I prayed. I wasn't disturbing anyone. Nobody was bothered. I wasn't troubling anybody. And and then I came in here and went and listened to various speakers. And if Muslims have to pray specifically 5 times a day. So obviously, if it reaches that point of the day and they're here all day, they're going to have to go somewhere and pray. So should just let Muslims pray. We
So
believe
as a Christian, it doesn't disturb you in any way?
Not in the
You've
slightest.
witnessed it before, correct?
You know why it doesn't disturb him? Because he doesn't have hate in his heart. It's simple as. If you don't like something, you're going to use for any excuse to hate it.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between him and those people. He doesn't have hate, they do.
Yeah,
And
probably that's it.
Thank you, my friend. Very good contribution. Anyways, guys, any other last questions? Any other last questions? No? Okay, Jazakumullah
Once,
khair.
we're going twice.
That's
3
it.
times.
Thank you very much.
Sold.
Jazakumullah khair.
Talk to the young gentleman there.